Welcome everyone to the 2021 author series presented by WAHI, the Women's Association of Hilton Head Island. We will begin our webinar promptly at 5 o'clock as we normally do. But until then, we're going to have a little fun, get to know you, and have some participation with our polling. We're so excited that we have got Patti Callahan Henry with us. She's a best-selling author. Her latest book is called Surviving Savannah, and it just came out in early March, Surviving Savannah. And so we're going to talk with her right at 5 o'clock. Again, our best-selling New York Times best-selling author, Patti Callahan Henry. And so I'm excited to talk with her, and Janet Porter is going to join us right now. She is my co-host and my colleague. Hey, Janet, you look great.
Hi, Robin. How are you?
I'm doing good. Now, I must ask you, your background is a little different, and that is why.
Well, as everybody on this team knows, my computer broke on Tuesday, crashed. And so I went searching for friends that would let me, Zoom from their house. So their kitchen is so beautiful. It looks like a fake backdrop. It is a lovely kitchen. So I'm at friend's house. So
well, looks great. And I'm actually I came upstairs at our house. It's because our dog is downstairs with my husband. So hopefully Shelby doesn't bark during our time together. So it's been a vaccine frenzy, right, Janet? We'll just get a quick update. I feel very blessed. I volunteer at Volunteers in Medicine, so I was able to get my Pfizer, both my shots, in February. And my husband was, as you know, pretty frantic about getting his, and he's had one, Moderna, and he's going to have a second shot next week. What about you?
Well, my husband and I are blessed. We were able to get our first vaccine a couple weeks ago, and our second one is next week. And, we're so blessed to be in a country that has at least 20% of the people vaccinated. But I want to, only 7% of Europeans are vaccinated. But, COVID envy is a real thing, and I want to be sympathetic to those on the call who still haven't managed to get appointments scheduled or get a shot. It's coming soon. We've had no reactions. I would encourage you to do it. And President Biden's saying we're going to have availability for everybody to get shots to get scheduled by May 1st. So I believe him, and I think we're going to be in a better place then.
Yes, for sure. So we're really excited because this is an anniversary for us, for our author series. This is our 10th session with our 10th author, and Janet and I being together. It's been really a great ride. It's been a great journey. We've met some phenomenal authors, read some phenomenal books. But we thought that this would be a good time, right, Janet, to kind of take a step back and ask you all some questions about the series and how it's going, any suggestions you have for the future, because we are going to continue the series throughout all of 2021. So our polling this time is as we get you involved. And again, we're going to start promptly at 5 o'clock with our best-selling author, Patti Callahan Henry. But until then, we have our first question, Janet. So if you want to launch the poll, and that question is, how many of the author series sessions have you attended? So is this your first one? Or have you attended between 1 and 3, 4 to 6, almost all of them, or all of them? So this is your opportunity to just hover over that circle, click on that, and vote. And we'll get a good sense, I think, Janet, of how many of our participants have seen or been involved with our various author series sessions. So what are you seeing? What are you hearing?
So I want to say that we have 13% of the people have been to all of them. So I want to commend those people. That is outstanding. Another 38% said they've been to almost all of them. So that means we have 51% of the people who either say they've been to almost all of them or all of them, which is fabulous. No one's a first timer this time.
Oh, great.
And another 44% say they've been to 1 to 3. But we have really good attendance today. I think it's because Patti Callahan is so well known and well known to WAHI. So, I think this is going to be a great discussion today.
I am so excited. I was actually, as I told you, I was at the Pat Conroy Literary Center yesterday in Beaufort, and they have moved. They're at a new location, and several of her books, except the new one, it was not there yet, And Jonathan Haupt was just going on and on about Patti Callahan Henry and what an amazing artist she is, author she is. So again, we're so excited to talk with her right at 5 o'clock. But let's get back to our poll. We're doing some market research on the author series, and we need your input. We need your feedback. So the next question is, why do you attend the WAHI author series, the Women's Association of Hilton Head Island? Is it because you just like to get to know the authors and their motivations for writing? Or I like hearing about new books that I might want to read? Or I find the author series just fun and entertaining, or other? And so, the neat thing about our series, you don't have to have read the book before you get to learn more about the author and see the author in person and hear his motivation for writing. That's what's really cool. Well, this is not a book club, right, Janet?
Yes, I think people who are author groupies love an author series where they get to know an author maybe that they've read a couple books of, or that they've just heard about and are interested in getting to know more about. And I think by the end of our webinar today, you'll feel like you really know Patti Callahan Henry. So I think we'll accomplish most of your objectives. So Robin, I'll just tell you that we had 41% has said, I like to get to know the authors and their motivation for writing. So, those are like the author groupies. I'm an author groupie. And then 37%, almost the same amount, said, I like hearing about new books I might want to read. And then 22% said they find us entertaining. I find the author series entertaining. If you have another reason, this is a good time to mention, Robin, if you have another reason, please chat it in, and you can just go to the chat function at the bottom or at the top of the toolbar on either the bottom or top of your computer and click on chat, and you can read everyone else. And then you can also comment. So Cindy, for example, just said, I read Patti Callahan's Henry's book, Becoming Mrs. Lewis, and it was fabulous in all caps. So if you're going to send us comments or thoughts there, that'd be great.
Right. Yes, I love that chat section. That's really the way in which we can connect with you all at home. So please continue to use that as we prepare for our interview at 5 o'clock. So so speaking of the chat section, we would like to know from you, where this is not actually a polling question, but we'd like to hear from you as to other recommendations for our author series as we continue it on Thursdays all throughout 2021. So you might say, replace the host, or get better authors, or different types of authors, or whatever. So just go to that chat button and click on it and give us your suggestions, your thoughts as we continue to prepare and plan and select new authors for the rest of this year. So I'm really hoping we get some good responses, because Janet, you and I and our whole team, which we've got a fabulous team, are going to get together and review this feedback so that we can, because this is all about you, our viewers, our WAHI members, our ladies that enjoy the author so much. So we just want to make sure that we're doing everything that you want us to do and asking the right questions to the authors and that sort of thing. So are we getting some thoughts, Janet?
Well, Robin, we've also modified the webinars. For example, we used to start and have the president talk at the top of the hour, and people said, get right to the authors, talk right away. So we're with the authors like 3 minutes after, based on feedback we've gotten. So feedback you could give us is much appreciated. We debrief every night at 6 o'clock, as we'll do tonight, to make sure that we've heard people and made modifications. But after 10, I think we have it kind of a little down pat. But we want to be better. And as you said, I'm excited that we're going to be offering this through the end of the year.
Right. And so we also like to ask during this time, as we prepare for our session to start promptly at 5 o'clock, we like to ask all of you that are tuning in now, any recommendations that you have of books that you've read over the last few months. This has been a hard year, a tough year during COVID. So either books you've read, a friend has read, a family member, or a book that you want to read. that you've heard about, whether, it's through a review or something, an interview on television, whatever it is. This is your opportunity to go to that chat button once again and give us any recommendations that you might have. And I think, Janet, we were talking actually yesterday about a book that you would like to recommend.
Well, I'm reading other Callahan Henry's books because they're all good, and I like to read several before they come up. And right now, I think the book I'm reading is called The Second Sister. You know, when you read it on or the other sister, when you read it on Kindle, you don't see the title so much, but it's a book that came out, I think, in 2019, and it's very good. In fact, I was up last night, not able to put it down. But the other book that I am in the middle of reading is Leading from the Outside. It's called How to Build Your Future and Make Real Change. And it's by Stacey Abrams, the first Black woman ever to be a gubernatorial candidate in our country. I was surprised to learn that we'd never had a woman,
Oh,
a Black woman, make it to be a candidate for governor. But this book is good for anybody at any age. She tells stories, and then at the end of every chapter, there's like questions you can ask yourself about where you would like to make change, what you're passionate about, questions like that. So it kind of is a little bit of a self-help book to kind of have you reflect on how you want to make change. And because it's called Leading from the Outside, it sounds like it's just a female or just a
right,
minority
right.
book, but I think it's good for anyone and she's a great storyteller, and you get to learn more about her. But I was thinking for our WAHI members, if they have kids in college who, can't quite figure out yet what they want to be. It's a good book because it's full of stories, but it's also full of reflection and helps you to reach by the end some conclusion of where you want to make a difference.
So how did you find out about that book? Did someone recommend it to you?
Yes, someone recommended it to me. A
Okay.
friend of mine in North Carolina said, I do a lot of leadership development.
Right.
And so she said, you really ought to read this book. It's really good for leadership. But I'm also big on, um, just having people have, whether they want to be in real leadership positions or they just want to make a difference at the local level by, making
Yes.
sure animals are better treated. I'm
Right.
really into helping. I've served on the board of AARP for 4 years, and they really are an organization that's really all about helping people 50 plus figure out what they want to do during
Mhm.
those years of their lives where they have such flexibility and resources and time, and so
Right.
that people really AARP is based on the philosophy that you can build stronger communities in the United States if we activate our wisest and most experienced citizens and deploy them.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is a whole bunch of recommendations too, I want to say, in the chat function. So Susie recommended Becoming by Michelle Obama.
Right.
Another person said Red Notice by Bill Browder, which I thought was great. And anything written by Kate Quinn. Marcy has just said she read Fall of Marigolds by Susan Meisner, who we interviewed a couple of weeks ago. And
Mhm.
by the way, Robin, before we get started, this is a good time to remind people that you can go to the WAHI website and see any of our videos.
Right.
And so please do that. We would really, if you want to go back, if you read a Susan Meisner book, you can go there and watch the Susan Meisner interview. So we recommend that for people.
Yeah, isn't that great? I mean, we've got such a superb communications team to be able to, record and then we post. And I mean, it's just our website is pretty awesome. And it's now wahi.org. So it's so simple. But we're going to start, I think, Janet. I think it's almost 5 o'clock, maybe just a few more seconds. Actually, I think we have about 30 more seconds. You told me yesterday that you read about 2 books a week. Is that right?
At least, yes.
At
I
least.
love to read. And during COVID, having something, whether it's knitting or crocheting or whatever, reading to keep you occupied has been so important. I've been very entertained by all the reading I've done.
You're also very busy and a very active woman. So that you find that time to read is so critical. That's great. All right, Janet, I'm going to have you sign off and we're going to officially begin our 2021 author series presented to all of you ladies by the Women's Association of Hilton Head Island. So this is March, it's March 18th, and we're very excited to bring a really interesting best-selling author, New York Times best-selling author, Patti Callahan Henry. And she's got a new book that has just come out. It's historical fiction. It is called Surviving Savannah. So here is a copy. It came out, I believe, on March the 9th. And it is all about something that happened back in the 1800s with a steamship that exploded, and the stories about what happened with the people that were on that ship. So it's, and of course, it's a lot of in-depth about Savannah as well. And so we learn about the various characters. So again, we're going to meet her in just a second. We're so excited that Patti is going to join us. We do want to remind everyone, there is Patti right there. Hey, Patti. But we do want to remind everyone that you can see us. We cannot see you. This is a webinar. It's not a meeting. If you do want to ask a question of Patti, or if you have a technical problem or whatever, use that chat button. And we have Nancy Fish, who is our technical guru. She will answer your questions and make sure that you're seeing what you want to see with our author today. So with that, I'm going to bring Janet Porter in. She is our esteemed interviewer. Janet, good to see you again. You look beautiful today in your kind of interesting background, the kitchen background.
Yes. Yeah, I'm lucky that I have friends that have such a beautiful kitchen. Mine wouldn't look this way.
Well, I'm going to sign off and turn it over to the two of you and have a great interview.
Thank
Hi,
you,
Robin.
so
Thank you for
much.
the intro.
Thank
Bye.
you, Robin. So you can see Patti's joined us today, and I'm going to do a little introduction of her so you know a little bit about Patti before we get started. I expect many of you have read one, at least, if not many, of her 16 novels. I had a chance to read Surviving Savannah. It just came out last week on March 9th, and I highly recommend you download it to your Kindle. Or I just was at Barnes and Nobles this week, and they have a lot of them. They have a lot of them available.
Good.
So
Good to know.
yeah. So let me tell you a little bit about Patti. The most important thing is that she spends part of her time living in Alabama and part of her time living right here in Bluffton, South Carolina. So she has been an old friend of Wahi and has been, many of you may recognize her, some of our long-term members, from the fact that she's been a speaker at some of our luncheons. I must admit, a very popular speaker. She is both a New York Times and a USA Today best-selling author. She's the recipient of the Christie Award, which is a 2019 winner Book of the Year. And she was the Harper Lee Distinguished Writer of the Year in 2020 and the Alabama Library Association Book of the Year for 2019. I think many of our viewers realize that Harper Lee is the esteemed writer of To Kill a Mockingbird, and I'm kind of a Harper Lee groupie. So I was very impressed you had won that award, Patti. She is also the co-host and co-creator of a popular weekly online Friends in Fiction live web show and podcast. And she's a full-time author and a mother of 3 children, and somehow manages to fit in time to see us. So welcome so much. We're so pleased you could join us today, Patti. I do have to tell the audience that we had a communication glitch, and Patti did not realize that she was going to be with us today until a couple hours ago. And she and I worked, and she scrambled to try to reschedule a podcast to be with us today. So Patti, I really appreciate your flexibility today. I apologize that we weren't in sync that you were going to be with us, because we've been advertising this for 6 months and we have great attendance today. So I'm glad you could join us. So you've been such a good friend, and we appreciate that. But why don't you start, Patti? Some people may have heard your story, but people said they like to participate because they like to learn about authors. So tell us a little bit about when you knew you were going to be a writer and how you got started.
Well, first, let me say how happy I am to be here and how I'm so glad it worked out. And when I got your text, I was like, poof, my head flew off, and I was like, we're going to make this work. I am not abandoning my Hilton Head group. So I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm so happy that all of you are out there, even though I can't see you. When I knew I wanted to be a writer, and I know I've given this talk before at Hilton Head, so I'll make it quick, but I think I always wanted to be a writer, but I think that in the generation I grew up in the 60s and 70s, nobody ever said that, writing is a thing you can do with your life. It was, do you want to be a teacher or a nurse, right? Or a secretary? And I was a nurse. So I went to college to be a nurse, but I was always at heart a writer. I think I wrote my first book when I was 6 or 7. It was just a bunch of crayon and stapled together. I was a bookworm nerd. I read all the time, still do, obviously. And just the power of story for me in my life was so intense that there came a time when I was in my 30s that I said, I just want to write one book. I just want to prove to myself that I can do this thing that has always sustained me. And so I took some writing classes and I started to write. And that was 15 books ago.
Wow, wow, amazing.
Yeah.
So I loved Surviving Savannah. And I
Thank
think
you.
I told you, Patty, there are books that you read. Then there are books that you kind of can't put down. But then there are books that you sort of savor. And I would put this in the savor category because I didn't rush through it because I didn't want it to, I wanted to find out what happened, but I didn't want it to end. So tell everybody about the premise for Surviving Savannah.
Well, I love that you just chose the word savor because I just received an email like right before I got on here from a bookseller pal of mine in Nantucket. And I haven't even read the email yet, but the subject line said savoring Surviving Savannah. So that's funny that you used the same word. I love it. The premise of Surviving Savannah, it is it is based or inspired by the very true story of a ship that blew up in 1838, carrying the elite of Savannah and Charleston who were headed north for the summer. And when I first heard about this story, a pal of mine, a mariner pal of mine in Bluffton, told me about it. And he gave me an article and I said, I don't really write shipwreck books. And he said, just promise me you'll read the article. And I broke my promise and I didn't read the article. And so a few years later, he brought it to me again and I read the article and I got that thing that, the chills you get in the back of your head, down your arms. There's a story here. And so I started to do my research. What is it about this 1838 untold and kind of lost to time shipwreck story? Why have I not heard about this? There are some very influential families from Bluffton who perished on the Pulaski. And there are some very influential families from Savannah and Charleston and Edisto, names you'll recognize: Seabrook, Hutchinson, Lamar, Samuel Parkman, who is from, in Bluffton and had the Octagon plantation. And why have I never heard of this? So I started doing my research and I was about 3 weeks into my research when I hit on a headline that said, Pulaski found by shipwreck hunters 100 feet deep, 30 miles off the coast of North Carolina. And I couldn't believe it. I just, once again, the hackles raised, the goosebumps, because while I was bringing up the lost stories of the passengers, somebody else was bringing up the lost treasure and artifacts. And at the same time, we were bringing this story that had been lost. And so I melded those two things. So there's a modern day timeline about finding the artifacts and treasure of this ship. And then you meet two women on the ship and find out what happened that night.
So Patty, that answers one of my top questions from reading the book. I wondered because I knew that they had just found artifacts.
Yep.
And I wondered what the sequence of events was, if you had started thinking about the Pulaski before or after. But what a coincidence that you were 3 weeks into it.
Isn't that crazy? And so a couple times I've been asked, do you wish you would have written it or listened to him the first time and written the story when he told you about it? And I said, obviously there was something in me that knew it wasn't the right time. There was something in me that was like, yeah, no, not yet. But then the minute I decided to write it was at the same time that somebody was bringing it up from the bottom of the ocean. So this book has been 3 years in the making. This was an incredibly, not difficult, but this was a heavily researched book. And it took years for me to find the information I needed. So if I had started writing that book 6 years ago instead of 3 years ago, I wouldn't have this part of the story. And this part of the story makes everything more interesting.
Yes, and I wondered. It's clear that it's very thorough in your research, and I actually wondered how long you were going to say that you had taken. But I want to step back for a second because the title of the book is Surviving Savannah, and this book is also an homage to Savannah. In fact, I was thinking that I feel like it's the biggest homage to Savannah since Midnight at the Garden of Good and Evil.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, yeah. And so many of you have probably read in the Garden of Good and Evil. And so talk about your relationship with Savannah, because when you read this book, you you can feel like you're walking through the streets of Savannah based on how well you describe the city, its history, its culture, its ambiance.
Oh, that is so important to me that you said that. So I know that y'all love coming to these author things. So you have heard more than once that um, of authors talking about setting as character, that the setting is just as important as the characters, and that is true. But I also believe that it's and both. It's also the petri dish, if you will, to use a medical term, or the soil if you're a gardener, the soil from which the story grows. And if you pull the roots of that story out of the petri dish or out of the soil and try to put it somewhere else, it's not going to be the same story. That's how important the setting needs to be for me and for most stories that are very setting based. Savannah is a storied and mystical city, as y'all know. And I've had a place in the Low Country for 30 years. My daughter went to SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design. So I've always had this great love for the area, for Bluffton, Defusky, Hilton Head, Savannah. And so I knew that I wanted to give it its due. I knew that I wanted to do it right. I didn't want to treat it with a passing glance. That's why the name is in the title. That Savannah was its own character, and it has its, just like a biography. Savannah has its own origin story. It has its own beginning. It has its own myths. And so, right from the get go of the story, in the very first chapter, you hear my main character, Everly's grandfather, telling her stories about Savannah and about the Pulaski. And she has a line in there that made me laugh when I wrote it. Her name is Everly Winthrop, and she says, "The Winthrops are very big on legend and lore." And that's because Savannah is very big on legend and lore. And one of the most fascinating things for me in writing about Savannah was digging into the mythology of Savannah versus the reality of Savannah. And so I hope that came across in the novel.
I think it really did. You gave both a contemporary sense of Savannah
Yep.
and a historical sense of Savannah. So it's almost like you did a lot of background research on the history of Savannah because the sinking takes place in 1838 of the Pulaski. And so you portray Savannah during both of those time periods. And so I thought that was very artfully done.
Well, I think, let me say real quick, Janet, I think I'm so glad you noticed that, because one of the things I did, and one of the things I discovered, that what we always have known this, but y'all, our museums in Hilton Head and Savannah are gems, right? That's where the real history is. It's, yes, you'll learn interesting and fun things on a carriage ride, but you walk into those museums in Savannah, and that's where our visual storytelling is. That's where you get to see the slave quarters, at the ships of the sea, you get to see the model of the Pulaski. When you step into Georgia Historical Society, you can look at the papers. You can't find everything on Google. Like, the boots on the ground in these museums and the interviews that I did with the curators, Janet, were where that kind of juxtaposition of the old Savannah and the new Savannah came from.
And Patti, I just want to commend to you and to the audience. There's a fabulous book called Gullah Days, which is about the history of Hilton Head. And I'm hoping that we can entice you to write a story that takes place in Hilton Head historically, because that book talks about Harriet Tubman being
Oh, wow.
on Hilton Head. It talks about Clara Barton being here, and so
No
many.
way.
Yes, twice. She was here
Wow.
twice. So there's so many, and we're hoping to have Dr. Carolyn Wright, who wrote the book, be one of our authors. But I was thinking as I was reading this book, oh, I wonder if she'll ever get intrigued with the rich history of actually Hilton Head Island.
Wow.
Because it's also, we have a really rich history around Mitchellville and the Civil War, and since then, so I
I'm
want
going
to
to get that book. You never know when a story idea.
Nancy will
You never know.
in for everybody. Yeah, Gullah Days.
Bubble up to the top.
It might.
Yeah.
I hope, like the guy who sent you Pulaski, that you'll be intrigued. So I also want to comment that one reviewer called Surviving Savannah spellbinding, beautifully written with a masterfully crafted plot. Surviving Savannah leaves the reader breathless and marveling at the manner in which the past and present interweave in ways we almost cannot imagine. So what do you think? He called it spellbinding. So what do you think is the key in your mind as a writer to making a book spellbinding?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I think some of it's innate. I think it has to do with this really difficult combination of an emotional journey along with a page turning physical journey. So for me and for most of us, so our brains are made of this, our brains are looking for story. Our brains are always trying to make sense of things. Our brain is a meaning making machine. That's why our brain loves stories, because it's trying to make sense of things, right? So one of the things our brain is looking for too is this transformational journey. How somebody starts versus what they go through and who they become. So if we as writers, which is the most difficult thing to do, can somehow combine this emotional journey with a very page turning what's going to happen to them journey, if you have all of one or all of the other and don't have them almost as, I don't know, let's imagine them as train tracks running along beside each other, that's when I think the best books unfold. And we care as much about what happens to them as a person emotionally, how they change, how they survive, but also the events. And if we can get that going along at the same time in tandem, that's when maybe we can hit that bing. So
Yes.
that's always the goal for me.
So I want to talk about research for a minute, because
Sure.
am I correct in saying, Patti, that your best-selling book was Becoming Mrs. Lewis?
Oh, yes.
Yes, yes. So big bestseller. And my book group read it and loved it. And in
Thank
fact,
you.
I've got people who are going to watch this because they want to get to know you because of Becoming Mrs. Lewis.
Thank
so
you.
that required, just mention that book for a minute and talk about the research you did on that. And then I want you to talk about the research on the Pulaski and Surviving Savannah.
Absolutely. So my last historical novel was called Becoming Mrs. Lewis, for those of you who don't know. And it is about the improbable love story between C.S. Lewis and his wife, Joy Davidman. And the book is written from Joy Davidman's point of view. She is becoming Mrs. Lewis. And that book, the research was very different than the book for the Pulaski. And I also have a history short story out about Florence Nightingale. It's an Audible original, so it's only Audible, but it's called Wild Swan. And so the research for that was even different than it would be for, so each of them has had their own kind of research based magic, if you want, if you can say that. So for Mrs. Lewis, it was very much about all those books behind me. I think the bottom two shelves are nothing but books by C.S. Lewis, about C.S. Lewis, by Joy Davidman, and about Joy Davidman. So an incredible amount of my research for that book was reading her poetry, reading her letters, reading their history and their biographies and their timelines. And yes, I visited London and Oxford, but I did not visit London and Oxford until I had a rough draft. And so, because I wanted to visit the places that were in the book. And I did visit research centers where their papers are in outside of Chicago so that I could read unpublished papers. But an immense amount of research for that book was reading. And then for the Pulaski, an immense amount of research was what I keep calling boots on the ground, because there isn't a book about the Pulaski. There is no seminal work on the Pulaski. There is no one source for me to turn to. So it was a lot of digging through files and boxes in the Georgia Historical Society. It was a lot of interviewing museum curators and trying to find out what they knew. It was a lot of digging for information in old newspaper articles. And I don't know if y'all, I'm looking over there because I have them. I don't know if y'all have ever tried to go on the internet and pull up old newspapers and read them, but you need a microscope, man. Those things are like, so I would have to print them and expand them. And it was a lot of boots on the ground for the Pulaski compared to mostly reading for Lewis and Joy.
And actually, that's what I was so surprised about, because this was, the book talks about this being seen as the Titanic of the South, the sinking of
Yes.
the ship, in terms of the number of passengers. And there were far fewer passengers, of course, on the Pulaski, but in terms of survivors and what they went through. And so were you surprised? Because I was surprised that this is such a historic event that so little has been written about.
It's, so I always say this. So if you've heard me say it, forgive me. I always say that finding an untold story is like having a secret whispered in your ear, because you're like, wait a minute, nobody's told this story. I can't believe it. And then that's when you know that maybe you're the one who gets to tell it. And that's how Surviving Savannah was for me, because I could not, I was really baffled why this story, there's no monument to the Pulaski. There's no, there is a semi-monument in Edisto for some of the people from Edisto who were on it. There is one monument in Bluffton, but it's not for the Pulaski. It's for Samuel Parkman and his 4 daughters who perished on the Pulaski. So it's just for him, and it's where his wife's gravestone is. So it's not about the Pulaski. And the Pulaski changed the face of Savannah, and it changed maritime law forever. And it is said that in 1838, so the ship went down on July 14th of 1838. Some of the survivors, the few who did survive, some of them floated 5 days and 5 nights at sea. And I'm not going to do any spoilers, but it is said that not a single person who lived in Savannah was not affected in some way. Everybody either knew someone, loved someone, or was related to someone who perished on the Pulaski. And even those who survived were very scarred, because they had survived, dehydration, starvation, watching loved ones perish out there on the sea. And they had they canceled the 4th of July. They had a citywide memorial. And how does that get lost? How does that kind of fade into time? And so I'm thrilled to bring it back. The one place it sort of still lives, and now even more so with this book, is in the Ships of the Sea Maritime Museum in Savannah. And if you've never been, it is one of the most fascinating museums, between the ship models and the artifacts. But right when you walk in, there is a huge, 6 foot by 3 foot to scale model of the Pulaski. So they hadn't let it go. They knew how important it was to Savannah, but in the mythology and tellings, it had been lost.
But that must feel like manna from heaven, that as a historical fiction writer, that you come across a story about a part of the country that you love, obviously,
Yes.
that has never been told. Is this Bobby is asking, is this the same name as the Fort Pulaski? Are the Fort Pulaski and the ship Pulaski named after the same person?
And there's a Pulaski Square in Savannah, and there's a Pulaski Bridge in probably every state in the country. And yes, they're all named after the same man. So there was a Polish cavalry soldier cavalry soldier named Casimir Pulaski.
Hmm.
And he was known as the father of the cavalry. And he fought for America in the American Revolution. And he died off the coast of Savannah in the Savannah Harbor, and it while fighting for American freedom. And so that is why so many things are named after him. His bones are buried in one of the squares in Savannah, and there is a monument to him. So yes, it is the same person, but it is not. Fort Pulaski and this ship have nothing to do with each other, except they are both named after Casimir Pulaski.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because I worked at a hospital in Chicago, and it was run by a Polish order of nuns. And there's a lot of things, statues and things named for Pulaski in Chicago. And then
Yep.
our clientele was primarily Polish. Our housekeepers, for example, all just spoke Polish, because this was the 70s, and they had,
Yep.
they had immigrated from World War II. So I'm very familiar with Casimir Pulaski, and I wondered all this time if it was the same person.
Yep.
So thank you for clarifying that. I also want to say that I want to just give a little hint, Patti, of the book you have coming out, because Dara has written in and said, loved Becoming Mrs. Lewis. And she's also excited about your new book coming out, Once Upon a Wardrobe, and she knew it was coming out October 19th. So she's
that's fantastic.
She's
Dara,
obviously a fan.
Thank you.
So talk a little bit about the relationship between Becoming Mrs. Lewis and Once Upon a Wardrobe and that book.
Absolutely. So Once Upon a Wardrobe, yes, it comes out October 19th. And if you're like what we call cover reveals, it's one of authors' favorite. If you want to know a little secret about authors, one of our favorite days in the publishing sequence of events, you have writing it, selling it, editing it, copy editing it, is the cover reveal. Because the cover reveal is when you're like, it's real. It's out there in the world. It's on barnesandnoble.com. It's on amazon.com. It's ready to rock. And so our cover reveal was yesterday. So if you're on Facebook or Instagram and you look me up, it's everywhere right now. But Once Upon a Wardrobe is about let me start from here. I haven't gotten used to talking about it yet. It is set in 1950 England, which is the year that The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe came out. And it is about a little brother and his older sister. And the little brother is very ill, and he is obsessed, as we can be, with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And he asks his older sister, who is a math genius and attends Oxford University, to track down the author who teaches at Oxford, C.S. Lewis, and ask him the only thing he wants to know: where did Narnia come from? It means life and death to him. He wants to know where it came from. So his sister, thinking this is a silly request, because she is a math genius and only math and physics matter, story is not important, does this because she loves her brother and tracks down C.S. Lewis and asks him, where did Narnia come from? And he does not answer her in the way we might imagine. And that's what the story is about.
Wow. And so many of us loved The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as children.
Yes.
So this will really entice people. You can order now probably on Amazon, advanced copy to download to your,
yes, you can
ship to you or download to your Kindle. So that's terrific. So Patti, this week I took a long drive from North Carolina, and I was coming back and listening to NPR, and someone asked, they were interviewing an author, and someone asked them this question. And I thought this was a good question I wanted to ask you. So the question is, so what do you most love about writing? Is it the research? Is it the creating the outline of the story? Is it character development? Is it setting? What brings you joy? I love the fact that Joy, Mrs. Lewis is named Joy.
So I love it too.
What brings you joy the most in the writing process?
Oh, wow. The most. I think it's when I finally know what the story is really about and I'm along for the ride. And then that would probably equal be the same as the joy I have in the research, and then the joy that I have when the readers have it in their hands and want to talk about it. But there is this time, there are long and isolated and lonely days when you're hitting dead ends and you don't know what the story is really about. For example, with Surviving Savannah, once I realized that the book was about surviving the surviving, the story broke free for me. And that's when it feels, like maybe you're in a flow with it. But yeah, those are, I would put those three things in a three-way tie.
So there's a moment when you get in a book where you all of a sudden feel it's clicking or you're in the flow.
Yes, and then like 2 days later, you're not. But there
Oh,
are,
it doesn't last, unfortunately, darn.
Sometimes it does. But yes, there are long, sloggy days, especially in the beginning, when you have an idea, but it's not fully formed yet. And for me, that usually has to do with understanding what my character wants. Where are we headed? So in Surviving Savannah, you have 3 women that we follow. You have a modern day woman and 2 historical women that you follow. One in Savannah and the 2 women in 1838 who are related and are on the ship. And when the ship explodes, they're separated. So you follow one who goes this way and one who goes this way. And I was hitting some walls. I couldn't get to the core of it until I realized what it was really about for all 3 women. And that's how do you survive the surviving.
Yes. And so for the title, did you recommend the title or did the author? I know that the book reveal is a big deal, but also picking the title is also
picking the title.
Interesting. So tell us about that process for Surviving Savannah.
It was the title I had from the beginning. And sometimes as authors, what we have are called working titles and they don't stick, right? They're just what we have to call it something. We can't call it book C, right? We can't, for a long time, I just called it the shipwreck book. And finally someone said, is that the title? I'm like, no, it's just the shipwreck book. So Surviving Savannah was called that from the beginning, but I honestly thought it was the working title. I think I had a list of, oh goodness, 25 titles. And we kept coming back again and again and again to this one.
So somebody has written in that they would love to be a professional researcher for historical novels. I think it's Bobby that's written in. Is there such a job that do writers hire somebody to do the historical research and background?
I never do because I love the research, but I for sure that's a real job, Bobby. You should go find how to do that. So there is a place called the Historical Novel Society. I bet that they have resources for something like that.
Well, that's so see, Bobby's has a whole new career now.
There you go.
So I want to ask the audience again, tell the audience again to please chat in any questions you have for Patti, and I'll try to get them answered. So Patti, we also love to hear about books that have inspired you and that made you want to be a writer, or that you use in some ways as examples of how you want to write. So do you have any thoughts on what those books might be?
Yes. I can tell you 3 writers who made me want to be a writer. Let me start with this. I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I moved to the South. I moved to South Florida when I was 12 or 13, which we all know is in the South, but isn't Southern. So the South didn't happen for me until I went to college. I went to Auburn University. And at Auburn University, I discovered Ann Rivers Siddons because she went to Auburn. And years before me, but I started reading her work, which led me to read Pat Conroy's work, which led me to some of the great Southern works. And I can vividly remember reading Ann Rivers Siddons and thinking, I want to do that.
Oh, you can.
I want to do that. In fact, I wrote an article. I'm fairly sure it's on my website, called How Ann Rivers Siddons Changed My Life or something like that, because she is the writer who made me want to be a writer. And I think I always wanted to be a writer. I think it was, in the core of who I am. And yet she awakened that. And I have this hilarious story of wanting to finally meet, well, it's not hilarious, but I wanted to meet her. I was dying to meet her, because this is back in the 80s when, no internet, we didn't go to author talks. If you happened to be somewhere and you saw a sign for a coming author, you went, right? And I lived in Atlanta after college. I was a nurse at Eggleston Children's Hospital. And there was a poster in the window of Oxford Books that said Ann Rivers Siddons was coming to do a book signing. So I went, and I was going to tell her everything I loved about her work. I had a full-on speech prepared, and I waited at the back of the line so that I would be last, so that when I met her, I could just say everything I wanted to say. So I get up there for my turn, and she was sitting there with her husband. His name was Hayward. They have both passed. But I opened my mouth, and this is what I said to Ann Rivers Siddons. I was just a babbling fool. And then I told her how much I loved King's Oak. And then her husband told me to just scurry on. And so it wasn't until I was published that I actually had a conversation with her, and I told her that story.
Oh, I bet she was proud to hear you say that.
Yeah, it made her laugh. Yeah.
And Patti, you've inspired us to read more, and potentially some of us to write. And we thank you so much for being a long-term friend of.
I love y'all. I'm so glad to be here.
I have to tell you, people have been chatting in and saying that they loved Mrs. Lewis. They've been chatting in and saying that if you write a book about Hilton Head, you absolutely will be the featured author at one of our meetings. So we still have authors come to our quarterly meetings. Of course, things have been a little different during COVID, but we thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for all the rearranging you did to make it possible for you to join us. And I really recommend people either download or buy Surviving Savannah. It's a terrific read.
Oh, that's so sweet. And I'm so glad to be here. I have to tell you, I can see the chat, and somebody just said, how has your writing impacted your children, or has it? And I think that's a great question. So I'm going to take 2 seconds to answer it.
Okay.
I have no idea. I know that I was very, very careful when they were young, that I was a stay-at-home mom. So I wrote when they were sleeping at first. I wrote early mornings. And then once they were in school, I wrote when they were in school. And my children are grown. I mean, I'm a grandma. So I have a 28, 25, and 22-year-old. So I should ask them. But now what they like to do is get me to sign books for their teachers.
I can't believe, did you see my face when you said you're a grandma? I'm like, you do not look like a grandma, honey. I was thinking your kids were young.
No, they're grown.
Writing must keep you young. Well, thank you again so much, Patti, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Y'all are amazing. Y'all take care, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you, Patti. Great interview, Janet. That was so stimulating. And Patti, I want to let you know that Jonathan Haupt with the Pat Conroy Literary Center says hi. I was over there yesterday.
Hi, Jonathan. I love him. And I love the Pat Conroy Literary Center.
And they've moved to a new location. And, many of your books are there. You got to get your new book there.
I need to give him a little ping and tell him to get my book in there. So, Robin, thank you for having me.
Okay,
thanks,
that
y'all.
was great. Again, the book is Surviving Savannah. Let me hold it up. We want to thank again Janet for that interview. Patti, that was so exciting. The power of research, the power of story, and the untold story of the Pulaski. So once again, a great opportunity to learn from an author as to her motivation, her character development, and why she does what she does. So with that, I'm going to turn it over now to our president, Tamara Averett. Tamara's going to give us a little update as to where we are with WAHI, and as we bring her presidency year to a close. So Tamara, I'm going to turn it over to you, dear.
Thanks so much, Robin, and thank you, Patty and Janet. That great interview, just really awesome. I look forward to reading the book, and I have a friend who just bought a townhouse in the historic district, and so I'm going to go get that book and send that to her as a Welcome to the South book. We have a couple announcements for this afternoon. The first is we're concluding our environmental and cultural speaker series and Women's History Month celebration next week. Tuesday, March 23rd at 5 p.m. we have Ahmad Ward, who is the executive director of Historic Mitchellville, and he's going to come and talk to us about kind of yesterday, today, and tomorrow with Mitchellville. And we're also going to have Dee Phillips come back and join us, and she's going to share a little bit more about the story of Mitchellville and the island, and Dee is with the Heritage Library. So come on out and enjoy that wrap up as well. Keep using your Surge Takeout Kitchen coupons. We're going to get a 10% back on every coupon that's redeemed. You can go to anytime to the event's website, download your coupon, give them to your friends and family, and enjoy your No Cooking March. We have a couple author series that are remaining in this WAHI year. Their author series is going to continue to go strong into the next year with Betty Hamilton as your president. April 15th, we have Christy Woodson Harvey, and then we wrap up with May 20th, Kirk Neely. But all of these, Neville, Kristen, and Mary Alice are already scheduled and ready to rock and roll. And you'll be seeing those events come up for registration shortly on our website. We have our spring membership meeting and luncheon. There's still some spots left under the pavilion, as well as bring your own chair. We've just expanded the capacity for sit out under the trees at the Coastal Discovery Museum. Bring your own chair. We'll have a catered downtown deli lunch, one of Bluffton's finest. We're going to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Youth Awards, and we're going to also be making the announcement of our 60th community gift, and we're excited to share that information. We are also featuring an athleisure style show. Not wearing pantyhose and furs is what they did in 1967 or 8 when this picture was out of the newspaper, but we're excited to share a little bit about the styles of today with these great show partners. And you'll see here, these are the ones that are participating, and we have, I think, 15 or 16 different WAHI models that are going to come out and share this and talk a little bit about performance fabric and stuff. We also have our gift raffle ongoing right now. You can go to the event's website, purchase your gift raffle piece. And we've got some amazing prizes that have been donated. This is a little cursory of snapshot of what's there, from gift certificates with Palmetto Running Company to the wrist trainer with Players World, private lessons with Coach Doug Weaver if you want to start playing golf or tune up your golf. We just had a donation from Talbot's of 5 breast cancer awareness scarves, and those are pictured also here on the slide. And so we're excited to have that, but most excited about the e-bike that's been donated from Hilton Head Bicycle Company. So buy your $20 raffle ticket for your chance at over $1,500, and all of the proceeds are going to go to the 60th anniversary gift contribution. We're also having a springtime golf scramble. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced player, you can come out and enjoy the afternoon, Friday, April 30th. We'll team you up with a team if you don't have one. If you have a team, register your team. Everything is included, $75, and we want to fill the course with women golfers. We have a couple other springtime events that are happening. April 20th, we've got a Burnt Church Distillery tasting on the schedule right now. Go and enjoy that great new venue. April 27th, we have a GNO, Girls Night Out, cruise at the Salty Dog. I think that might already be full. And then we have a May 6th Rollers Women Winemakers Tasting event that's happening. I think there is also an April 22nd Nature Interpretive Walk at the Audubon Newhall Preserve that may be out there with a couple spots left. So as always, check out the event site and find something fun to go do. Again, thank you so much to Patty. Thank you so much for everybody here, and really appreciate you all coming out today, and as well as Patty and Janet and Robin's efforts. Back over to you, Robin.
Thank you so much, Tamara, for your leadership once again, and looking forward to seeing everyone on particularly April the 8th at the Discovery Museum, the Coastal Discovery Museum. Well, that's a wrap for this author series for March with our fantastic author, Patti Callahan Henry. Again, her book is Surviving Savannah. You can find it online. You can find it actually at Barnes & Noble. We have a partnership with them. And so again, we appreciate your time. We appreciate all of the comments and the polling that we did earlier about our author series and your recommendations and your feedback. So have a great weekend, everyone. And we'll see you on April the 15th. Right, April 15th with Christy Woodson Harvey with Under the Southern Sky, our next author, as we continue the Wahi author series for 2021. Bye, everyone.